Greetings from Bangkok, Thailand. Y bienvenidos, welcome to the 30 minutes promoting unity in diversity with Wanayran AlvarezAngerer in moving cultures. Today, afternoon hours in the United Kingdom and also in Thailand, we have a very special guest. When we talk about movement, music, understanding of other cultures, the power of inner persons. This is a synonymous of our 157th guest of the series, Diepiriye Kuku, who is Nigerian and US citizen based in the United Kingdom at the moment. So welcome, Diepiriye, how are you?
Hi everybody. Hi Wani. So good, so good. I'm humbled by your introduction. Yes, all good things to talk about. Thank you for doing this, Wani. Thank you for having me.
And thank you, Diepiriye, for accepting the invitation to talk about your life, your journey. What is 2022 preparing for you and for your loved ones and for the people you care? And also for the world, because you're a person who not necessarily only connect with a specific circle of people, you are very a global citizen. So who is Diepiriye Kuku?
Who is Diepiriye Kuku? Well, certainly first and foremost, I'm a global citizen, but I really do think of myself as just a Kentuckian, born and raised in Louisville, Kentucky. Now, I left Kentucky when I was almost 18 years old. So now at this age, I've lived outside of my hometown for much longer than I have in my own hometown. And so when you ask who I am, and you use, the term global citizen, because I know also you are a global citizen, absolutely. I do have to say that part of being a global citizen is not disconnected from our homeland, but part of it is being rooted. Just a person who's rooted and seeking roots. Roots are never finished. Roots are never done. Roots are always growing. So everything that I do, and certainly in 2022, will be for me about being more grounded in who I am, what I believe, what I enjoy, what brings me pleasure, what allows me to bring value to my world and the world around me. And I want to be very serious about this in 2022, about bringing joy to our world. We've lived under a cloud for almost 2 years now, I think, because of COVID. And again, for someone who is fashioned themselves in being around the world, it's been very difficult to be forced to be so grounded. You're in Thailand. I spent the first year of COVID in Vietnam. I took time away from my job here in the UK so that I could go and enjoy life in Vietnam. What did I find? Of course, lockdown. I had dreams of going to Thailand every other weekend and traveling the entire Southeast Asia, but I had to find joy in being very grounded in a new place. And so that's something that I don't want to cut off from or shy away from moving forward, is I want to immerse myself in that experience. And it doesn't mean I just want to immerse myself in being at home and exploring who I am and who I am in relation to the rest of the world, but to produce things and opportunities for us to think about. And what does it mean to connect and connect meaningfully, using all the technology and our distance, and yet we still have this will and drive to connect. That's who I am, someone who wants to connect.
You come from a very multicultural background. You're connecting different continents and traditions. What can you tell us about that side of you?
Well, I find it weird that my father came all the way from the southern tip of Nigeria, an island on the southern tip of Nigeria, just through the hand of fate is in Nigeria and not Cameroon, because Cameroon is right across the border, closer to the island than is Lagos or the capital. And so he traveled all the way to my hometown to go to university, which is where he met my mother and a circle of friends who would raise me, a community of very Afrocentric people who would raise me. And so I didn't grow up around my father. My father and my mother decided to not be together when I was a very young person, but the very reason why they were together in the first place was reflected in this community. And oddly enough, it's exactly the kind of community that you create. Artists, dancers, musicians, painters, people who sew, and people who enjoy being around, and people who can provide space for artists to do and be. My parents found each other and found such a community, and I was raised in such a community. My thread and contribution to this was dance. So I was in dance classes, but of course, in order to have dance classes, you needed musicians, you needed costume makers, and I was born in 75, so in America, I was very Afrocentric minded, and very much wanting to reach to and to a Pan-Africanism, Afro-Caribbean. The Afro-Caribbean diaspora is huge in the United States. So there's always a constant infusion of Afro-Latin and Afro-Caribbean culture. So I grew up in that era where people were making these communities for young people. And I do want you guys to imagine it, because I know all of your listeners know you. I grew up as one of those kids, like your children, and being immersed in such a community. And it always made me see myself as grounded in Louisville, Kentucky, like Muhammad Ali, but very much knowing that we are a part of the world. And the one way that we're a part of the world is through our cultural links, and that we must honor and celebrate them. We're coming up on Kwanzaa, and that's a holiday created in the United States to mark our Pan-Africanism. To just say, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, let's talk about the power of women from your family and their influences on understanding your feminine side, because they play a very important role in your upbringing.
Well, why don't we just go ahead and name a few? And I know everyone, of course, has a grandmother. Sorry, I shouldn't say that. Not everyone has a grandmother, but everyone can imagine what it is like to have that grandmother who always has her arms open, who always has a pot on the stove, who always has leftovers ready, who's always coming or going, and doing so with other people, involving other people. And so I did have such a grandmother. She grew up picking cotton in Alabama. That's her, Alice Lyles. And she made it through high school, but she was a tradeswoman her whole life. And I say that she was a matriarch, and I don't use that word loosely. She was a matriarch, and she with her elder sister and younger sister were matriarchs of our family. So of course they grew food when they moved to the city. They didn't grow cotton, but they all had vast gardens. Of course, they had an abundance of food that they would share. So they would freeze food, they would pass it around to everyone. So all year round, entire generations of people had fresh food. One of my images of my grandmother is a little nook next to her house where she would grow greens, collard greens, kale, not kale, that came later, turnips and mustard. And if you don't know, greens are harvested after the first frost. So I just always remember my grandmother on her hands and knees in November, it was cold, and she'd be picking greens. And so by Thanksgiving, we had literally the freshest vegetables. And the gift, of course, she was giving was nutrition. She was teaching me how to do these things and value them. So real genuine actual skills. And we know how popular organic growing and cooking and grow your own is today. Well, my grandmother taught me how to grow organic food. And I had it, and I grew a taste for it. But of course, there's also this element of care with food. You know, one of my earliest memories is spending summers with my grandmother and her sisters. We would go through the summer harvesting. You know, you could pick your own, pick strawberries at one point in the summer, pick peaches, pick apples. And then we would have to we had so many, we would have to do something with them to preserve them. So they got the kids involved in all of these things. So it was very clear that we were producing things for our bodies, nutrition, to give and express care, and using our labor to do that. And also, I was being given skills, and equally, we were in control of the household economy. We were in control of the household economy. This was a huge expense, food in our lives. And when you say, you know, getting in touch with the transformative, with one's feminine side, I want you to imagine Thanksgiving. It's my favorite holiday. So on the other side of the wall from where my grandmother is picking those greens is her dining room, formal dining room my grandparents had. And Thanksgiving in our family with all of her sisters and their children and their children's children. So all me and my second cousins, we would have different holidays at different people's houses, and my grandmother had Thanksgiving. So on the other side of this wall, we're eating the greens that she cooked. Now, until, like many cultures, until a certain age, children don't really have a strong gender identity. Even in German, as you know, das Kind. To a certain age, children literally are gender neutral. I think about this in many cultures I've been to around the world, where even toddlers don't wear clothes. And even children are under the domain of the mothers. My family in America is very much like that. So we had all the house chores and all these things until a certain age, when the boys start doing more things outside and the girls more things inside. But all the children had to cut the grass and all these things. So back to Thanksgiving, we were getting to the age of being teenagers, and fewer boys started contributing to cleaning up after such a vast meal, for example, or even cooking. You know, this Thanksgiving is an indoor meal, as opposed to summer meals that are barbecues where men do more barbecuing. So Thanksgiving is total female labor. And by the teenage years, boys and girls are starting to, in my family, segregate between the housework and not. So I'm one of the younger ones. So one of my eldest cousin, he tells me years later, he's 55 now, 50 something now. He tells me years later, when I was 15, he's 8 years older than me. So when I was 15 and he was in college, after Thanksgiving meal, I immediately just got up and seamlessly started cleaning up with the women. And it wasn't the specific task of washing dishes, which again was more gender neutral, but I started putting away food. I started clearing the table, and I wasn't asked, I wasn't told, you know. And he said that it had never occurred to him that men could also do this. This is my eldest cousin, and he is now a father. He's now a husband, you know, so he's with a Black woman in his life, and he has 2 Black boys. And so now I know that it's really important that this man be one of the primary cooks in his home now, that he be one of the primary caretakers in his home. And that he says that for him, part of that journey was not just that he also saw his mother doing these things his whole life, but his father wasn't cooking. His father wasn't, doing the cleaning. But when he saw me do that at 15 years old, he thought, wait a minute, maybe I need to. And so when I think about getting involved in my feminine side, understanding it, my feminine side, for me, it's my grandmother has always been an ally. She never said, I accept you as a gay person. I accept you as an effeminate little boy. I've always effeminate little boy. But none of my family said this. When I came out to them at 16, they said, yeah, of course, we always knew. And they always accepted me and looked after me. And as a younger person, of course, as I tell them now, different from all of my cousins, they were explicitly at one point in their lives told, look after Diepiriye. You better look out for him. So at 8 years old, my 10-year-old cousin is told, look after him. At 5 years old, my 12-year-old cousin is said, make sure he gets something to eat. And so I grew up knowing that I was cared for, protected.
Mm-hmm.
And this was important because I was very different. And the outside world was not like that. It's like literally I step outside the pavement of my grandparents' big yard that we all had to mow. And I was with the other kids. And, boys will be boys and girls will be girls. And I didn't play football and basketball. And so I had the confidence to know that when I could potentially be bullied, I knew that I was okay. I knew that something was wrong with them and not with me. Of course, there was doubt, and it took me a long time to really, and probably I'm still, I have to remind myself sometimes, or certainly I do. But my cousins gave me this confidence. And this is one of the ways, a few years later, that same cousin, I challenged him on his sexism. He still is very much sees himself as into Black power. And I see myself as affirming Black power. But as you know, there was a period in Black power where that was very much patriarchal and male Black power. We would celebrate Black womanhood and their beauty like a beautiful afro, but we were still kind of less clear on women being leaders and women being in the front and women having say. And that's very different now in the Black Lives Matter movement, where merged, you could say, with Me Too movement, you absolutely have women in the forefront. You absolutely, so just like at home, you absolutely have women saying, this is how you get everyone involved, and this is how you include everyone, and this is how you build a movement by including everyone, not competing over who can be louder or physically stronger, but who can be more inclusive. And that's the power of what my grandmother was showing me by always embracing me, always accepting me, always telling me that I was okay, and always creating an atmosphere that created a standard for how you interact with people. And so that's the kind of leadership that I imbue. I hope to. That's my ideal standard for a leader. And my grandmother was a reader. The last book we read together was Bell Hooks' Where We Stand, Class Matters. My grandmother had a high school education, read the newspaper every day, read books, and read so-called academic books like Bell Hooks. I say that because Bell Hooks was my favorite writer, a Kentuckian. She passed away 2 days ago. And people consider her a Black feminist or Black womanist. And she has theories about looking at society and culture through the lens of culture, how we live culture. And one way to see, in a sense, on how we put culture onto the body is how we categorize culture. Obviously, the first category we see is gender and race. You can see that I'm a male, so-called male. I mean, I have a beard, and you can see that I am Black. And you can start to perceive my, ethnic background or cultural background, and that these have an impact on how we start to perceive and interact with one another. And so she talks very clearly about this. I even have a quote here from Bell Hooks. And Bell Hooks says, in order to cut through all of this, we have to be very clear about our purpose and even thinking about life. And that for her is love. She writes about the transformative power of love, both as artists, but also just as everyday people. And this is why my grandmother and I would read such books, because my grandmother identified with what Bell Hooks was talking about. My grandmother, a different generation, of Bell Hooks' parents' generation, and me of yet another generation. And yet we all can understand the idea that we have to create the spaces for equality and acceptance around us through being loving to the people around us. I'm sorry that the sun is just shined come up. That's England, so I'll try and get better.
Yeah, let's try to change the position of your. Yeah, that's a lot better. Okay. Yeah.
And so, I think of my grandmother. Of course, my aunts followed in this thread in their own different ways. My mother, as I said, as the daughter of my grandmother, equally allowed me to dance. She physically took me to dance classes, clapped at my little performances as I twirled around and tried to pick myself up. Found African dance class, found a ballet class, found African dance classes. And as I said, physically took the time to physically take me to those classes and pick me up. And she says it was hard because she was a single parent. She tried to get my cousins and others involved, but not everyone in her family knew the value of getting a young person involved in such a community. And I use this example because, our very first performance in our ballet school was in February. So you can imagine the ballet school started like school probably in the summer or September. So Black History Month is in February in America. And we put on we did our little, what we did in class. We did some little dances, we did a little recital, whatever a 5-year-old can do. But then we did a play, and we each had to take a character from Black history. And we were given pictures of different people and whatever a 5-year-old can understand. And I chose Toussaint Louverture. Toussaint Louverture. And you know why I chose him? His hair and his outfit. He looked like Frederick Douglass, but he was magnificent and regal. And I believe they showed us a picture of him on a horse, and he led the Haitian revolution. And I was just speaking about this the other day with my mother. We have these terms like decolonize the curriculum. I have a PhD. I've studied in liberal schools since I was in the 2nd grade. I've studied in liberal schools. I've never studied Toussaint Louverture in school until I went to university and studied Black studies. Like, I actively said, I'm going to study Black studies. There is no class, no book. And so fortunately, my mother, again, took me to this school, connected with other like-minded people like you. And one of them was a ballet teacher, and her mother was a ballet teacher. And one of them was an artist, and they put together in their house a studio, a stage. And they said, we're going to get all the 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds we can find. And one of them is going to be Harriet Tubman, another is going to be, Toussaint Louverture, and somebody's got to be Rosa Parks, and someone's got to be Martin Luther King, of course, and someone's got to be Sojourner Truth. So ain't I a woman? I'm 5 years old looking at little girls and boys do this. And this is the most important thing my mother can do, because she's got to go to work and she's exhausted from work. But this is what she takes her time out to do. And yes, I noticed that there are other single mothers there. Yes, I noticed that most of the parents there are single mothers. Yes, I know that I realized that I was one of few boys in the ballet school wearing a tutu. When I went to the African dance school, completely different. And there were many more boys and girls involved, but most of our teachers were women. The people who led it were women. Nania Santiwa, shout out to her in Louisville, Kentucky, because all of these people were again carting their own selves back and forth to these classes, be it the drum class, the dance class, the sewing class to make our African dance costumes. I was a black ant in Toussaint Louverture, 7, 8 years old, dancing on stage like a black ant.
Yeah, we're going to support your conversation with some images.
Okay.
Okay, let's go to this.
How is the lighting? The sun is moving, so.
Yeah, it's okay. Now that you are going to be talking over the images, you can find a more comfortable position with the light. So far was good. So
okay.
We were talking about your grandmother who is here on your cell phone, your iPod. I also have one exactly like that I love it. There's not so many in the market anymore. Let me move to another image because we practically reached the 30 minutes and I think it's important to really go through these images. Every day we can say something that has the capacity to heal and help people.
Yeah. That is from Thich Nhat Hanh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That's one of my former students, Sharon at London Pride. Sharon is one of my former students studying business, and she was all about sustainability. She was also into the arts. I got to know her, however, when she was not my student. We became friends and she was doing her master's. And this is when she was representing her student union at the London Pride. Okay. She, it's important to say, is not a queer person. She's an ally. And I've gone to London Pride to just see. And she said, hey, there you are. And so she drew us in. And I got to march in London Pride. That is in Vietnam. At my sabbatical year, they have a Teacher's Day in Vietnam and in many parts of Asia. And at this university, at the Hanoi University of Science and Technology, for Teacher's Day, each department competes in a talent competition, and the students watch and have judges. So we, in a sense, reverse it. And I got to sing and dance in Vietnamese, a traditional song made into a pop song. Oma Boma Limbo, Oma Boma, and I even had a cameo. You guys know I'm not a great singer, but I can certainly dance. So I sang with my colleagues. Oh, my stars. You see what I mean when my cousins always have my back? The guy behind me is 2 years older. The woman behind me is 3. They're grandparents now.
Wonderful.
Yeah, and that's my mother, taken by that other woman's son when we went on a family trip to Savannah, Georgia.
And also looking after your back.
Also looking after. That's my university graduation picture. As you can see, I love hair and I used to have a lot more. That's when I could still color my hair. That's not even my natural color. That's midnight.
Oh, wow.
And that's my high school graduation picture. No, that can't be high school. That's a fraternity picture. So
yeah, it looks a little bit older.
Phi Beta Sigma, yeah. Yeah, I always had flair. My mother said to me, I never made you wear a hairstyle that was uncomfortable or wear clothes that were uncomfortable. And you know, our hair, Wani, is so just, we almost think of it as a problem. And you know, I was watching my cousin comb out her little daughter's hair the other day. And it was so painful for her. And I just thought to myself, there has to be a way for this ritual between mother and daughter, especially, to not be so painful. And just when my mother said that, because I did have an afro when I was a kid. And she said, I never made you, for example, pick it out and always have to, you know, you look neat. And equally, I never made you wear uncomfortable clothes, including, she said, I had My mother joked this, I had an African color sensibility, that I would put any colors and any patterns together.
Exactly.
And she would let me.
And that's happening more and more every day.
And that is my 25th birthday party. I was teaching in Korea, teaching English. And that guy, one of my buddies, is Frederick Kim on the left. He was also an English and or French teacher. He's an Anglo French Korean, and that was our surprise birthday party.
Fantastic.
Yeah. At university, these ladies in our fraternities and sorority, and this is solidarity. These ladies that you see in this picture got me through my studies. We had a lot of joy, a lot of partying together. But for example, the tallest woman, Farah, on the far right, sitting next to me in most every chemistry class, studying till 2 or 3 in the morning, doing chemistry sets. That woman next to her is a doctor, medical doctor. Now, I mean, just all of them. They're, and it's this brotherhood and sisterhood that we had and we experienced through the Black Greek societies. That's why they're wearing the colors that they're all wearing.
And once again, the hand, very powerful image.
One of the side hustles that I did while I was living in New Delhi was modeling. I got the chance to be in Vogue magazine with a furniture company. And one of the things that you'll find when creative people get together. So we were all, the light designers, the costume, and of course the photographer for the photo shoot. We were all creative people and we wanted to just make art. So the photographer and I got along, Ashish Chawla, and he said, let's do something. And he wanted to do something with chocolate, with my chocolate skin and chocolate things. So this is my hand covered in chocolate. We have others with coffee, and there's a background that very much close to my skin. And so I'm nude. It's not erotic or sexual, but there's no nudity, but the point is to show my skin and these items and that just play with the colors. And it looks like blood, but it's of course not blood. This is me doing spoken word with my upcycled sweater here in Northampton at the Bardic Picnic. There's a rich community of poets here in Northamptonshire, maintained by people just like you. And what else? This was Ashish's little brother, Anil. Ashish's little brother in India is also a photographer. And once I got with Ashish, you know Ashish.
Yes, I know Ashish, yeah.
Do you know his little brother, Anil? Anil and I did some things together as well. And you can see I love my hair. And so we also played with texture and tone and light. So Anil and I did some shoots together.
Fantastic.
And, oh my gosh. And there is the matriarch herself. You see the resemblance?
Of course.
That would have been just
ageless. She's an ageless soul.
And that's where she grew up picking cotton, exactly there. My family moved back from Kentucky to Alabama in the last few years of her life. Fantastic. And that was me. That was when I lived in India. That is by Sunil Gupta, part of the New Raphaelites. That was in the Tate Museum. That's me and Savi. We're both activists in Niga, the queer collective in India, part of the Voices for 377 that got the colonial law repealed in India, part of that group. And we and other members of Niga and other activists modeled for Sunil in this series and other series. Beautiful work. So this is a huge size print.
Yeah, very powerful.
New Raphaelites, yeah. In Lahore, you know that as someone who lives in India, I got to know the woman in the middle, Britta, the white woman. She's German, and she works for a German political organization. And we went to train all these lecturers from all around Lahore in critical thinking. They're all different topics. And you can see my partner, Hoger, there. And what's interesting is that I also got to talk about pop culture. They'll teach all different topics, but we could all understand the tools of critical thinking by looking at Michael Jackson's Black or White video. And as you know, Wani, it's very difficult for people on either side of that border to go. People in Pakistan to go to India, where we lived, and people from India to go to Pakistan, and yet they're cousins. So all of those people, knowing that I lived in India, they wanted to know more about India. They wanted to connect. What's it like? What's life like in India? That's all they wanted to know. And I wish I could say, just go and see. But it's much easier for you and I to go across that border than for them.
Well then.
Yeah. That's in Hanoi. That was on the visit before we decided to go there permanently on sabbatical. And I'd connected with other friends through friends, and we went to see a jazz night, and we took some pictures there and danced. We danced tonight in Tunisia. That's who I wish I was. That's by Anil Chawla, and that's how I see myself. And he drew it out of me. That's the power of a photographer. He knew that's who I want to be. I'm a teacher, I'm a writer, I'm a dancer, but I wish I could do what Wani does. And I wish I still had those abs.
So this is the last image on our gallery. And now we go back to the main screen, and we are going to ask you to deliver a message for the new generation. We already reached the 30 minutes, Diepiriye. I know that our conversation should last several hours, but it's been so enlightening and fresh, you know, to hear your stories from childhood, youth, and actuality. So what are you going to tell to the new generations about inclusion, diversity, and participation?
Okay. Well, I would say to the young generation, 3 things. First of all, accept the fact that these are unprecedented times. You are young people who are living like no other generation has lived. You have technology that no other generation has had, and then you have conditions that no other generation has had. And yet we all want to connect. We still do. So use this thing to connect. But then when you're with people, put it down. When you have the opportunity to talk to people, even when across spaces, put it down and just be there, be present, be with them. Accept that this is a time where we really know that that's a human value, that creating the opportunity to connect is itself valuable, just like Wani is doing here. The second thing I would say is, of course, in that time, read, explore, write, listen to music, talk, think, give yourself time to think through ideas. Because one way that we see that the world is giving us trouble, and that this is specifically doing that, is not allowing us to have any downtime to just be with ourselves, certainly, to calm ourselves and re-energize. And so the last thing I'll say, and to bring all those things together, is one way to do that is literally to pick up a book. It's meditative. You can learn something. It can take you somewhere. You can use your imagination. You're not just being shown or told what to do or what your opinion should be, or given someone else's opinion that you have to therefore respond to. So I want to close, Wani, with one idea. And it is, unsurprisingly, from Bell Hooks. It's this quote that I have here on my phone. And it's very appropriate for Christmas. We're all about to buy a lot of gifts. So what can we do that's more valuable? And from All About Love, Bell Hooks writes, when we see love as a combination of trust, commitment, care, respect, knowledge, and responsibility, we can work on developing these qualities, or if they are already present, already a part of who we are, we can learn to extend them to ourselves. So this season, and as the year comes up to a close and we think back what we've done and accomplished, as we think forward about what our goals may be, as we face yet another wave of COVID, let's remember, let's take care of ourselves. Let's be good to ourselves. Part of being good to ourselves is taking time. Part of being good to ourselves is reaching out and connecting with others and genuinely connecting with others with purpose. And part of having purpose is, I believe, really understanding love, thinking about love, and always wanting to have a healthy relationship to love, and that being reflected in everything that we do, in our work, in our cooking, in our friendships, in all our relationships. That's me in a nutshell.
Thank you for promoting unity and diversity through your life, your way of thinking, and your everyday activities. Have a wonderful end of the year celebrations and an amazing 2022. I hug you all the way from Thailand, and I hope very soon to be able to give you a physical embrace and a more musical kisses.
Thank you, Wani. Thank you so much for all you do for us, for the world, and for art and art in the world. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you,
So
Diepiriye.
grateful. Thank you.
See you soon.
Take care, everyone. Be well. Thank you.